Hi, Fred. Great to see you.
Hi, Peter. Thank you. Thank you for your really kind words. And I just want to acknowledge the fire in the belly that Wang Ji just provided.
Amazing.
Uh, that kind of passion and commitment, first of all, from her personal story that started off her presentation, but then swinging up through what it means to bring that into work and to collaborate with everybody and anybody and everybody. I found that in the work that I do. I found that really inspiring. Um, so a little bit of a pivot, maybe from fire in the belly to some real practical issues for at least a little bit here. And this question of who are you? I have to say, this is something I am grappling with very much in my professional life and in my personal life in a lot of ways. And my goodness, these events of the past few months have really fueled some of that for me. Um, and this is what I'm about to do is a version of a talk that I've done for the past 5 or 6 years for different groups of emerging composers and performers at conservatories mostly. Uh, but I realized that in the last 3 months, a lot of what I've said in the past has either become outdated or just flat out wrong. And over the past couple of days, I've kind of poured through this. I've done some updating, I've done some rethinking. But in the spirit of what Wang Ji was just talking about, I would invite your collaboration as we go through this over the next hour, hour and a half. I would invite you to listen really critically to what I'm saying, to draw on your own experience. And then as we get toward the Q&A at the end, bring the hardball stuff, bring your real talk. And it's entirely possible that I will learn more than anybody here today. I'm really looking forward to this. And I'm just looking around the room at the folks who are here. Some of you, just as Wang Ji had this experience, I know some of you and many of you I don't. I'm imagining a collaboration with this group that's in this room, some kind of ensemble put together with this exact group, and thinking how exciting that might be. I see violinists, at least one bass player, several cellists, singers, composers, media folks, at least one filmmaker, several conductors, guitarist TY, who spoke a little bit earlier. And as Peter is putting together this festival of emerging musicians and creators in this realm, you are the future. This group right here, right now, you are the future of this art form. Among composers, conductors, pianists, instrumentalists, and everybody, and I have to say, I love seeing the diversity of this group: geographical diversity, ethnic diversity, age diversity, various levels of career experience diversity. You're a self-selecting group to be here. And the fact that you chose to be here says to me several things about you: that you are among the more innovative, among the more ambitious, among the more kind of never say die, never take no for an answer, among the more creative and expressive artists and up and coming artists of our time. And again, I look around this room and I see the future of this art form. Something that I tell people in these talks and I say on the radio, part of the reason that I think the future of this art form is assured is that there's, again, this room is the perfect example. There's more talent in up and coming generations now than ever before. I talk to professors at conservatories around the country, and this is specifically about instrumentalists. They say, thank goodness I don't have to audition against today's young players. The talent level is incredibly high, not just on the technical level. It is, the technical level of players has gone up incredibly in the past 20 years of musicians in their teens and 20s, but so has the maturity level. A lot of top young players have more access to better teaching than ever before. So I'm thrilled about this. I mean, there's been a lot of chatter about, is classical music. We could talk about the term classical music and what that means and doesn't mean. But is classical music dying? More about that in a moment. But I'm just thrilled, given what I see among young up-and-coming artists of all kinds, that the future of this art form is assured. Despite all the obstacles, I mean, pre-2020 and in 2020, the future of this art form is brighter than ever. As a listener, I'm heartened about this. As a music lover, I'm heartened about this. And in my professional capacity, I have absolute confidence in this. Some of you were around in 1997. A book came out called Who Killed Classical Music? Anybody remember this? It launched thousands of kind of hand-wringing conversations and editorials and think pieces about, are we seeing the death throes of classical music? And again, I think we're actually entering the golden age of this art form. And on top of that, here's something that makes me profoundly sad. In today's world, and this is to go back to those compliments I just kind of gave you one after another, all those kind words, all those compliments. It's not enough to be innovative, to be talented, to be ambitious, to be creative, to be expressive. None of those guarantee a career. If a tree falls in the forest and nobody is there, does it make a sound? Well, if a composer writes a piece and nobody plays it, does the music exist even? If a conductor only ever conducts in front of a mirror, if an instrumentalist only ever plays in the practice room, I mean, even more than any tree in the forest, you need to be heard. You need to get your work in front of ears. And of course, and I want to acknowledge this, there are many different ways of measuring success. Personal satisfaction with your own output and expression. Measuring your work by your own standards. Measure it by your colleagues' responses. Measure it by commissions you get if you're a composer. Measure it by appointments and gigs, posts, scholarships, awards, the amount of money you make, the legacy that you're leaving for other people. You don't have to put your energy into anything other than writing music, playing music, conducting, creating your work in your corner of this art form. You don't have to do anything else. But if you want those gigs, commissions, appointments, awards, if you want to be heard, if you want to be not even necessarily get approval, but at least get some attention, there are some things that you can do to make that more likely. First and foremost, and most glibly, make great music. Easier said than done. I have no competence to help you on that front. Wang Ji can help a lot of fellow composers. Peter and the many folks he has assembled for the next festival can help you out with that, and your many teachers and colleagues right here in this room. But maybe I can offer some insights on a different front. And just out of curiosity, I'm going to expand my screen one more time here. How many of you, I know that I see a lot of people in the room at a lot of different levels. How many of you have done media interviews in one form or another, or had pieces written about you and had people ask you questions about your work? Just kind of trying to gauge the room. Now, keep those hands up because I'm kind of scrolling through, seeing everybody. Okay, nice mix of people in different stages of career. Oh, maybe a follow-up question. Among those of you who have been interviewed by somebody, did the interviewer have a clue about you and your work and the world you work in? Thumbs up or thumbs down? In this realm, A lot of times those pieces are written for publication journals, or now even in social media, that a lot of that work is done by people who just don't know this arena or this art form or its history, and certainly not what people are trying to do today. So with that in mind, what is this narrative about you and about your work that's out in the world? How do we answer this question? Who are you? So what's your story? Well, in fact, there are a multitude of stories. There's your story. There's the story you tell yourself about who you are and what your work is. There's stories your family tells, there's stories your friends tell, colleagues tell, stories your teachers tell, I don't know, orchestra managers tell, if that applies, the stories that concert venues tell, program books tell, newspapers, TV, radio, the stories, social media, the story TikTok tells about you if you're on TikTok. And in my experience, a lot of musicians for a long time, and this is changing, but a lot of musicians assume that that story is out of their control and would prefer to complain about bad writers or interviewers who ask the wrong questions. But there are some simple things that are in your control. And Peter mentioned one of the two main things I want to focus on. How can you open doors for yourself in the world of media? What's your story? What's the narrative about you in the world? Who's telling that? Who's shaping that? You can leave that up to other people, or you can take it into your own hands in some fairly simple ways. You can have a great deal of control and influence over that. It begins with your bio. It seems like one of the most simple, one of the most basic things. But as somebody who's worked in media for more than 3 decades, I cannot overemphasize how important this is and the impact that this can have. And I want to try to directly illustrate that for you here. I mean, you know, your bio goes in programs when concerts happen. So it's the first thing an audience might learn about you, read about you. But it's also often the first thing that people in the music business learn about you. People go to your website if you have a website, or they check out your bio wherever they can find it. And again, another question worth asking, I'm going to expand the screen again so I can see you all. How many of you are at a point where you have a written bio for yourself? A lot. And how many at this point in your career do not? And of course, either answer is fine. It's where you are, and it's totally cool. Wherever you are is where you are. Cool. Well, let's talk about this. So what is a bio? Let me read you an example of what I often see and for what often passes as a bio. The names have been changed here to protect the innocent, but this is taken from a real bio on a real website. And by the way, it's from somebody whose work I admire. But this is the bio. A native of Los Angeles, and I'm making up a name here, Aria Polyrhythm has been establishing herself in Southern California as a successful composer and pianist. Her music has been described as, quote, truly beautiful and inspired, and explosive. She's received commissions from the New York Youth Symphony, the Aspen Summer Music Festival, the Los Angeles Philharmonic Committee, the Argus Quartet, Peabody Camerata, Trio Appassionata, the LA County High School for the Arts, and Sandbox Percussion, among others. Aria has won numerous awards and honors, including a Charles Ives Scholarship from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, a Presser Foundation Award, New York Youth Symphony's First Music Commission, a BMI Student Composer Award, multiple awards from the National Association of Composers, And that list continues and continues and continues. Aria, next paragraph. Aria has been a composition fellow at the Los Angeles Philharmonic's National Composer Initiative, the Aspen Summer Music Festival and School, the Norfolk Chamber Music Festival, Bennington Chamber Music Conference, has attended the Bang on a Can Summer Music Festival. She's been artist in residence at the Birdcliff Art Colony, the Kimmel Harding Nelson Center, and that list goes on and on and on. Aria holds degrees in composition and piano performance from the Peabody Institute of the Johns Hopkins University and the University of Southern California, where she's currently pursuing a DMA, Doctor of Music and Music Composition. As a new music pianist, Aria has dedicated herself to commissioning and premiering new piano works. She's the pianist and founding member of the LA ensemble Boulez Punks. I made up that name too. All right, so, and let me go back to seeing all of you. And let me just open this up, as a matter of fact. What do you remember about Aria Polyrhythm?
Punks.
Punks, which is the part I made up.
Something about Los Angeles.
Boulez Punk. Yeah. I shouldn't have made up such a memorable name for the very last thing. Giancarlo says lots of listing. Yaz says long list of things that should be in a CV. LOL.
Accolades.
The first thing she said, which was Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't remember anything else.
Gotcha. Mark says, I remember native of. Kate remembers a list of accolades. Exactly.
Hi, Fred. How are you?
Hey, is that Ching?
Yeah.
Ching.
Oh, yeah. Hi. I'm so glad you mentioned this bio thing because, I have been wanted to see other people's bio, but I find it very powerful actually is to cite or include the reviewer's comment in bio. I find that is very powerful.
And Aria, I'm using a pseudonym here, did start with a little bit of that. Her music has been described as truly beautiful and inspired, and that was from I Care If You Listen, and explosive, and that was from Gramophone magazine. I left out the citations, and those are actually excellent citations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, Ching. And by the way, Ching is quite an accomplished media professional. I'm honored to be appearing with Ching as part of her interview series coming up on Monday afternoon, 4 p.m. Eastern. She's on YouTube as Jewel Media, J-U-H-L, Jewel Media. She's done an amazing series of live interviews. Wu Man, the pipa player Wu Man, who Wang Ji mentioned, I just saw them talk recently, and Ching, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm already learning a ton from you about visual media, which is brand new to me. Thank you, Ching. Oh, and there's Peter posting a link about that. Okay, so for me, this bio, I mean, it's far from the worst. And again, it's a real person. It's based on a real person's bio that I've paraphrased and changed a lot of the names. And it's somebody whose work I admire, but I'm looking at this and I don't remember much about this person. I don't have a sense of who this person is. I see a bunch of awards, and boy, did I skip a lot of things on the list. But if it's an interviewer trying to learn about you, what does the interviewer learn? The average concert goer now knows what about this person? A grant committee sees this person distinguished from other applications. How? The interviewer, what questions can I ask this person? How does this shape my story? It does not shape a story about this person. Your bio, and again, this is from my experience reading bios and choosing who to interview and figuring out what to ask people, your bio has more impact than you can even imagine. It shapes your narrative from the very beginning. Let's take a look at, and I'll do some screen sharing here. Let's take a look at what I think are some more effective bios and see how they shape the narrative about these people out in the world. And maybe this is no surprise. Let me pull up the right thing here before I do a little screen sharing. Okay, and now back to Zoom. And now let me find the screen share button. Boink. There we go, share. Wang Ji, who was on right before me, who, by the way, Wang Ji and I are married. Some of you know that, some of you don't. And now you all do. And first of all, we'll come back to this, I think. You'll notice there's the biography and there's the standard bio. We'll come back to that. Here's the biography, and I'll pick some highlights. Part cartoon character, part virtuoso, musical whiz kid Wang Ji has been nudging serious music and its concert audiences into spectacular frontiers over the past few seasons. Her From New York with Love transformed a classic percussionist into a dervish-like rock star. Her chamber opera, Flown, dramatized the end of a rocky love affair by having the two pianists attack each other and their shared instrument. Despite having the worst title in the history of music, Oboe Concerto for the Genuine Heart of Sadness channeled the power of the League of Composers Orchestra into an orgiastic whirlwind. An unexpected collaboration with comedy writer Paul Sims inspired a song cycle about dying funny that coaxed belly laughs from an otherwise sedate Opera America audience. Not one to let herself off the hook at her Carnegie Hall debut, she shape-shifted into a monkey god while leading performers of her concert opera From the Other Sky. There's a touch of glorious madness to G's work, but her colleagues and mentors at the Curtis Institute of Music, the Manhattan School of Music, and the NYU PhD program have been long aware of the skill, theatricality, and method behind it. Now, as you can see, there are paragraphs and paragraphs beyond that, and far beyond standard headshot pictures as well. But as a reader of this, I have a sense of the person now. I have a sense of some character. There's a sense of humor, there's self-deprecation. Oh, but by the way, there's some things that you would normally get in a list. She's had a Carnegie Hall debut. She went to Curtis and MSM, NYU PhD program. The credentials are there, but it's not just a dry list of credentials. It's couched in a really fascinating, inviting way. You can see this paragraph down here. After a successful escape from a military-run kindergarten, G's parents decided that a dose of discipline was necessary to manage the 4-year-old's oversized frontal lobe. And you heard G talk about this. They plopped their shrimpy child in front of renowned composer and pianist Yang Li Qing. So there's that character in the biography, then there's the standard bio. At the forefront of the younger generation of American composers, Wang Ji has emerged as one of the most evocative musical voices. Ranging from elegant to campy, her works are powerfully engaging, richly orchestrated, and rhythmically vibrant. One day she spins a few notes into large musical forms, the next she calls zodiac animals to the opera stage, a rare trait in today's composers. And now, just notice the wording here. Born in Shanghai shortly after the Cultural Revolution, Ms. Wang was raised in an era of breathtaking economic and cultural expansion. She was a known piano prodigy by the age of 5. Okay, so how does this shape the story about her that's out in the world? Well, WQXR wrote about her. They begin with a quote which is not attributed, but which was lifted from American Composers Orchestra. She knows how to take a few notes and spin them into a large form, a rare trait in today's composers. Composer John Corigliano speaking about Wang Ji. Then, born in Shanghai shortly after the Cultural Revolution, Wang Ji was raised during an era of breathtaking economic expansion. This story, published by a major reputable musical organization, simply lifts the bio verbatim. You want to have power over the story that's being written about you? Write exactly what you want to have printed, because writers, man, am I about to make a big generalization, are lazy. They might have 15 assignments. The editor says you got to have this one done by tomorrow and that one done by Thursday, and it's not finished yet, and you're late, and you're behind. Oh, so I better find the bio and just lift it. So that's about as direct an example as you will see. And I mean, it just goes on for several paragraphs, which are listed, which are lifted straight from G's bio. Another example here. Oh, here I actually found the citation from the American Composers Orchestra with John Corigliano. So they lifted something from one website and lifted something from her bio. Okay, that's one example. Pianist Jonathan Biss. This is, so many of you may know him, some may not. Jonathan is a fantastic classical pianist. He plays a certain amount of new music and has done some commissioning. Best known for his Beethoven recordings, Schumann recordings. The Straight Ahead Repertoire. Is now one of the co-artistic directors at the Marlborough Festival. He teaches at Curtis. He's got a major label recording contract, and this is his official bio. Jonathan Biss was born in 1980. His professional debut preceded this event by several months, when he performed prenatally the Mozart A Major Violin Concerto at Carnegie Hall with the Cleveland Orchestra under the direction of Loren Mazel. That is about as fascinating an opening sentence. Oh, and then it has a footnote. Okay, so let's scroll down. What's the footnote? The New York Star Bulletin observed when visibly pregnant violinist Miriam Fried was extremely, visibly pregnant violinist Miriam Fried was extremely persuasive, and the more obviously active soloist, it was impossible not to be moved by Mr. Biss's more modest contribution. Quiet, really very quiet, but with an inner conviction which was quite haunting. So again, like Wang Ji, a very serious artist, educated at the highest level institutions, but who's exhibiting a sense of humor, self-deprecation, getting credentials in there, but in a way that immediately attracts my attention, makes me interested in the person, and I think, like, wow, what a cool story. His mother was pregnant playing violin on stage at Carnegie Hall. Where does that story show up? New York Times, when Jonathan Biss had his Carnegie Hall debut in 2011, some interview, some people commenting on his work, and then this paragraph. Mr. Biss traces his history at the hall to a prenatal experience. His mother, violinist Miriam Fried, played a Mozart concerto there with the Cleveland Orchestra when she was pregnant with him in 1980. Straight out of his bio to the pages of the New York Times. And that story from Jonathan's bio has basically become the lead about him in almost every single story written about him for the past, 12 years, 15 years. Why? Because he put it at the top of his bio. That's why. That's the power your bio can have. You know what? Okay, Gustavo's got a great bio on his website because he can afford it. Most of us cannot afford this level of all right. It's a fantastic multimedia bio with embedded videos and fantastic writing, but none of us, including me, are at a place where we can afford that. Okay, let's go back to this, and I'll stop screen sharing for the moment. Did I stop screen sharing? Did I do that successfully?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I mean, those are extremely direct examples of the bio that you write, that you control exactly and directly, controlling the narrative about you, telling your story in the world. So, like I said, it's not enough to be innovative and talented and creative and expressive. whether you're a composer, pianist, conductor, instrumentalist, this makes me sad as a music lover. In some kind of ideal world, in a meritocracy, that would be true. The music business is not a meritocracy. That should be blindingly obvious, but my experience is that the world of classical music operates even more on a star system than the world of pop music. That the known names get more attention and more attention and more attention, and it is so hard to break through, even in the era of social media when you can have your own platform. Classical music operates on the star system. There's a young man, well, now not so young anymore. There's a gentleman I know who's a pianist who was written up in the New York Times when he was 10 years old, an absolute prodigy. I met him about 25 years ago. At that point, he was in his late 20s. I was hosting a show on WNYC, the radio station in New York. He came on for a live appearance. He played the Appassionata Sonata by Beethoven, played the hell out of it. And right after that, he and his fiancée got married live on the air on our radio show. It was this really dramatic moment. I loved his playing. It was a really fun wedding. I asked him for a bio, and he said, no, I don't have one. I'm not going to make one. I don't want one. He said, it's enough that I play well. That will make my way in this world. He does have a website. I looked at his website this morning, and it mentions concerts that he has coming up in 2013. Like I said, it makes me really sad, and I don't want to say it's as simple as this, because his story, like any human being's story, is complicated. But he wanted to believe that his merit as a pianist, which was prodigious, was enough. It has not yet been. So if you're sending music to an orchestra, if you want to get noticed by a festival, a presenter, stand out as part of a grant proposal, in a competition, the first thing the jury learns about you before they hear you play, they read your bio. If you're going to do an interview, or if you're trying to get somebody in the media to pay attention, first thing a reporter reads about you or a writer reads about you is your bio. This is where your story in the world begins. It seems incredibly reductive to boil it down to this. And I've been kind of turning this over and over in my head, especially in the last few months. Like, is this still true in this world that is changing so fast? Not just the kind of cataclysms that are churning our world, but the way media is changing so quickly. Is this still true? I'm dying to hear your experiences about this and your perspective on this, but I believe this is still true. I am in an extraordinarily privileged position to have some say about who, I mean, I host a radio show that's on coast to coast. And if I want to interview somebody, they get on the air. What's the first thing I do? I look at a bio. I also listen to performances. I listen to recordings. I watch stuff on YouTube. I try to keep track of every social media channel. But I read a lot of bios, and some capture my attention and some don't. I'm not going to pick anybody out and name any names. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but it may or may not be illustrative to look at bios of yours if you have them. I see a lot of people I know here in this group, and many I don't. Does anybody want to do that? If not, that's totally okay. If you'd rather take that into the woodshed and do that in the woodshed, totally get it, totally support that. But if anybody wants to do that, I'm totally up for doing that in a supportive way.
Fred, I just wanted to mention
Yes.
that we will be saving some time at the very end after
Mhm.
5 o'clock, after 6 o'clock for just the students of the
Mhm.
festival. And so if any of you would feel more comfortable in kind of a more closed setting, I just wanted to bring that up too.
Yeah. Yeah, it does not have to be here and now in front of everybody. That's available if you want to. And you know what? Having said that, you know what? Let's take a look at mine, which is not perfect and which I have been grappling with. Let's take a look at mine right now and critique it together. All right, let me go back to the right screen. Let me do, okay, share screen, share. Here we go. The website starts off with about the show. And here we go, about the host. Fred Child loves music and the outdoors, Italian cheese, English soccer, flying, baseball, and cardamom. Since 2000, Fred has been the host of APM's Performance Today, the most listened to classical music radio show in America. Fred is also the commentator and announcer for Live from Lincoln Center, the only live performing arts series on television. Fred also hosts musical events on stages around the country, working with major orchestras and festivals and connecting with audiences coast to coast. Beyond the world of classical music, Fred hosted NPR's Innovative Creators at Carnegie, a program of wide-ranging performers in concert, including Brian Wilson, David Byrne, Dawn Upshaw, Yusu Ndur, Caetano Veloso, Emmylou Harris, and many more. Fred was music director and director of cultural programming at WNYC in New York, host of a live daily performance and interview program on WNYC, and for 10 years, a host at Oregon Public Broadcasting. I see some lists. He's done this and that. His work has appeared here and there, blah, 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 blah. While growing up in Portland, Oregon, Fred studied classical piano. He also dabbles in guitar, percussion, and bagpipes. His percussion band opened for the Grateful Dead at the Oakland Coliseum. He's narrated works at the Aspen Festival, with the Virginia Symphony, with the U.S. Marine Band, and at the Round Top Festival. His rare musical performances in public include percussion with Sharon Isbin and piano four hands with Andre Michel Schub. He appears as an actor in a video commissioned by Philip Glass. Fred loves baseball, throws right, bats left, soccer, fan of Tottenham Hotspur. He's an avid rock climber, licensed private pilot, certified scuba diver. His better half is composer Wang Ji. They make their musical home in New York with a musical Sealyham Terrier named Pilot. All right. If I'm going to take shots at somebody else's bio, let's take some shots at mine right here, right now. Let's see. Let me stop share. Let's see. I see some, Paulo has written a few things here. Regarding some ways to be known publicly sometimes makes me desire to be private and reserved. I know I'm wrong about this. What do you think about this? Paolo, oh my goodness. I've only met you a little bit, Paolo, but man, have you touched a nerve with me with this. Because despite the fact that I host a daily national radio show and I get up on stage and host events, and I am intensely introverted. I'm not naturally given to sharing my feelings and emotions. And this, Paolo, what you're talking about here, man, that conflict is very much alive for me. I don't want everybody to know about me. I don't want to share everything. I don't want stalkers. I want my life to be my life. I want my private relationships to stay private. My bosses at work want me to put videos up on Facebook every day of just my average life. I don't want to do that. And yet, what is the story about me that's out in the world? What is the story about me that I want to be out in the world? there doesn't have to be an exact one-to-one correlation between those two. Who am I in the deepest, most personal moments, and who am I in the world? Well, I have thoughts and ideas and desires and ambitions about both of those. At least for me, and Paulo, this is what I'm having a really strong reaction to what you said. There's not always a one-to-one correlation. There absolutely are parts of myself that I have not and will not share with the world. Then there are people like Ned Rorem. Ned Rorem was a composer who was famous not just for his work, but for his diaries, multiple volumes of which were published and which became famous for his musical insights, but also for sharing sometimes graphic details of his private, personal, and sometimes sexual life. I'm not Ned Rorem. I mean, and Ned Rorem was doing this 40, 50, 60 years ago. I'm not going to do that. There are other people today who do that. Paulo, I think you and me are not those people. And if we're going to be doing this work, if we want to be part of the world, there is a story and there are stories about us out in the world, and we can choose to shape those stories or let other people say whatever they want. I choose to take some effort to shape the story. I know I don't have total control, but I want to have some. And the times when I have been interviewed, almost every single time people ask me about playing in a band that opened for the Grateful Dead. Oh, that's unusual for somebody who's in the world of classical music. What kind of band were you in? What kind of music did you play? What was the band called? What was it like? Did you meet Jerry Garcia? Almost everybody has asked me about that. People ask me about playing the bagpipes. People ask me about, I don't know, flying small private planes. My bio, as I'm rereading it, doesn't have the kind of sparkling personality of Jonathan's or Wang Ji's, but it has enough elements to give somebody some questions to ask. Let's see, Evan Kahn is here. Evan is a cellist, and Evan and I worked together a fair amount because he was a young artist in residence on my radio show, and we traveled together and played some concerts. And oh, it scrolled and I lost your comment, Evan. Here it is. Oh, I love your bio. Thank you, Evan. That's kind of you. If the ideal bio is gripping and quotable for publication, then maybe we can edit it to have more parts in a narrative structure instead of being expository. Yes. Beautifully said. And that's something I love about both the bios of Wang Ji and Jonathan Biss. They're not afraid to just make assertions and say, this is who this person is. This is what this person's work is like. This is what characterizes this person and this person's work. Sometimes with a citation to a reviewer who wrote about it, sometimes just stating it as if it's fact in that kind of narrative form that you're talking about, Evan. Ching is a written comment from Ching. Thank you, Fred, for talking about the bio. I read bios of people because I need to host them to be in my talk show. Yes, it's such a simple thing to have a bio, long and short, for different usage. Yeah. Kate says, I agree with Evan. I'm curious about how you pivoted from studying performance to broadcasting, and if you could make that part of the narrative somehow. Ah, I love that, Kate. Since you include information about your early life studying music and your experience broadcasting. Kate, I never thought of that. I love that. Thank you. Like I said, I might learn more than anybody from this session. Wang Ji says, Fred, darling, but you never forgot a face and a musician you've worked with. Well, that's changing as I get older, my dear. Yeah, Kate, that has, your comment has been deposited. Yeah. And it's kind of an accidental and I won't go into all the details here, but yeah, I started broadcasting when I was a student at Oregon State University in Corvallis, Oregon. I had no idea what I wanted to major in. I wasn't a good enough pianist to major in piano performance. I was really at loose ends, just kind of a general studies student taking whatever classes every semester. There was a student-run radio station. Again, incredibly lucky to be at a place where I could just sign up and say, can I be on the student-run radio station? They were like, yeah, take a jazz shift Wednesday morning, 8 o'clock. Okay. And I have a vivid memory of the first time I went on the air. I watched somebody do it like 8 weeks in a row before I worked up the nerve to do it myself. LPs, this is back in the early 80s. 2 turntables and a microphone. Coltrane recording, and I had the next thing queued up, and Coltrane came to an end. I turned down the pot, opened my microphone, and I literally did this for about 10 seconds. I stared at the microphone in utter terror. This is an 8-watt radio station. There's probably 3 people listening at any given moment just on campus. It doesn't even reach beyond campus. I was terrified. I turned off the microphone, played the next record. That was the beginning of my broadcast career. Perfect place to learn broadcasting, because I could make every mistake, and I did make every mistake, and it didn't really matter, because there's 3 people listening at any given time. So a nutshell version of it. But then I started working at Oregon Public Broadcasting, and I got turned down the first time and applied again a year later, and I got into it. I already had the love of music, took 10 years of piano lessons. It was kind of the basis of my getting into music. I already had that. I found this completely surprised me. That not only did I love the stories about music and the people behind the music, I loved sharing those stories. And then I'm thinking of Wang Ji's comment earlier about failing, just recognizing that that's a part of the process, failing again and failing better as much as you can every time. First interview I did was with a pianist, a jazz pianist and composer in Portland, Oregon, who's still one of my heroes, not that well known nationally. Dave Frischberg is his name. I wrote these kind of quirky, funny jazz songs like Peel Me a Grape and My Attorney Bernie. And he helped with some of the Saturday morning cartoon stuff. He and his friend Duro, last name, I'm blanking on the first name, but he and his friend wrote things like, I'm just a Bill, and I'm only a Bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill, Saturday morning stuff. And I interviewed him. We're on the phone. I had a few questions written down. I'm incredibly nervous because I've loved his music for 10 years. And I want him to like me, just like G was saying. I mean, this is human. I admired him so much. I wanted him to like me. And I got nervous and flustered, and I stumbled. We're not live on the air. We're just recording it. And at a certain point, I said, I'm sorry. I know I'm not doing very well here. It's my first ever interview. And he said, oh, you're doing great. You've got... Just what's your next question? I'm really curious. You're asking interesting. Well, yeah, we're just talking. Not a big deal. If he had been a different person, if he had said, yeah, you're right, see you later, it's possible I never would have tried again. So now I admire him on multiple levels. As a pianist and composer, and as a human being. Dave Frischberg is his name. Just looking down the comments again from G. Fred got 4 minutes 33 seconds right first time on the radio. Yes. Jerry Ho, conductor Jerry Ho. How should we deal with the length of the bio. I was so glad to meet you and work with you, Jerry, on stage at the Grand Teton Music Festival in Jackson Hole several summers ago. Jerry, are you still at in Houston? I'm not sure exactly where you are, but
yeah, I'm still here in Houston.
Nice. Teaching at Rice?
Still teaching at Rice.
Fantastic.
Still at the Grand Tetons.
Fantastic.
And, yep.
So how should we deal with the length of the bio? Do you need to pile the accolades or credentials up front if they're skimming? Or is it simply having a great hook to encourage the reader to actually take the time to read it all? No one answer to that question. You might have noticed that both Wang Ji and Jonathan Biss had very long bios. Ji has 2 very long bios. And in any one sitting, I've probably never read through them in one single sitting, but I read the paragraphs, different paragraphs, different times I pick them up. And that's fine. Actually, let me show you another example that's kind of the opposite extreme. Let me pull this up. Did I keep this page open? I did. Kelly Hall Tompkins, an American violinist who lives in New York. All right, let me go back to Zoom and hit the screen sharing. This was a really interesting question, Jerry. Okay, so here's the front page of her website. Ching, you were saying you liked press quotes. Well, here's a bunch of press quotes. Impressive, says the Strad magazine. Honorarium winner from the Naumburg competition. American Record Guide says expressively wrought with rich tone colors. Fanfare magazine, nice review from Fanfare. And then just a few bullet points. New York Times, New Yorker of the Year. Whoa, that makes me want to know more. WQXR 20 for 20. I know that list, like 20 interesting people in 2020. That's kind of cool. Trailblazing entrepreneur of classical music and social justice. That makes me want to know more. And then a quote from the New York Times. In the Broadway revival, Fiddler on the Roof, title role, Kelly Hall Tompkins, the versatile violinist who makes the music come alive. Just a few words on the front page. I'm into it already. If I'm interviewing her, I got 4 questions already. What was it like playing? What was it like being the fiddler in Fiddler on the Roof on Broadway? How does that connect with your classical training? What's your interest in social justice? How do music and social justice connect for you in your experience? What are some of those experiences? That's just the front page. This is kind of like a mini bio for Kelly Hall Tompkins. It's got a nice picture, obviously a New Yorker, given that, looks like a New Yorker given that background in that stairwell. I'm already into it. So there's the long form bios that G and Jonathan Biss have that totally suck me in. And this, I mean, this isn't even a bio. This is just the front page. I'm already there with her. I already want to know more. I want to hear her recordings. I want to hear her talk. I'm into it. So these are 2 opposite extremes of ways to do it. You know, now that I look at it, I actually don't like the font. This is super picky, but the font that she's using for the quotes, it doesn't pop to my eye. I have to kind of work to read the words expressively wrought with rich tone colors. Change the font. Beyond that, it's great. All right, stop sharing. Let's go back to the group. There's another comment from Ching. Wang Ji gave me 4 versions of her bio: short, mid-short, and long. Super helpful. As a musician and artist, we need to make our presenter's life as easy as possible. Well said, Ching. Don't make the media people who want to write about you work. Make their lives easy. Also, we need to promote the event, our event, using social media, emails, and caller contacts for support. And Ching, I could be doing a better job promoting my event with you on Monday. You're so right about that. Jerry, I don't know, does that approach an answer to the question you had about length of bio?
Yeah, I mean, I I had some comments about a bio when I had some people looking over, and it says like you sort of bury the lead or some of the accomplishments that I had, and they said, you know, you should put them all at the very top. And then of course I had my lovely wife read it, and she was like, why do you have all this stuff at the top? I really don't care. I want to know more about you. So
I have to say I'm with your wife on this one, Jerry.
yeah.
The standard advice from classical music publicists is exactly what you just said. Put the biggest credentials, list them all right at the top.
Yeah.
A list doesn't grab me. I want some human interest. I want to know something about who you are. Everybody has a list in their bio. I don't want a list up front. Totally subjective opinion, but that's me. And yeah. I get the credentials in there, but and even rather than a list, do it in those creative ways that Jonathan and Wang Ji did. I mean, that's even better if you can. All right. The next step of this would be, okay, so you land the interview, somebody is going to talk to you. Then what do you do? Let me go back over here. Oh, you know, I actually wanted to read just one or two more. So here's one that's pretty quick, pretty straightforward. It doesn't have that kind of wacky humor of which I really like in G's and Jonathan's. But Caroline Shaw is a New York-based musician. She's the youngest ever winner of the Pulitzer Prize for Music for her enigmatic composition, Partita for 8 Voices. Her career defies categorization. She performs as a violin soloist, chamber musician, and as a vocalist in the Grammy-winning ensemble Room Full of Teeth. She also frequently collaborates with Kanye West. Currently a doctoral candidate at Princeton. I think this needs an update. This is from a little bit ago. Caroline also studied at Rice and Yale. She loves Caroline loves the color yellow. Otters, Beethoven Opus 74, Mozart opera, the smell of rosemary, and the sound of a janky mandolin. Love it. Pretty straightforward. And yet I feel like I've learned some things about her already. I have a sense of her personality. And if I'm an interviewer, I've got half a dozen questions all lined up. New York-based composer Nina C. Young writes music characterized by an acute sensitivity to tone color. Her experience in the electronic music studio informs her acoustic work, which takes as its given not melody and harmony, but sound itself, continuously metamorphosing from one state to another. Interesting. And that might be a place to start. And I know some of you who are in this room have bios that characterize your work, and that helps me find my way in. I like that. All right, so you get the interview. Then what? I would say if I had more time, I'd list more, but let's narrow it down to 2 principles of coming across well in an interview. Have a point of view and tell personal stories. Have a point of view, take a stand about something, make an assertion. And I'm going to do some screen sharing so I can play some audio again. Not again, because I don't think I've played any audio yet. Let's hit the screen share button. Screen share, there we go. So,
I'm going to reveal to you the sexiest piece of classical music ever written.
Could you hear that? Could you hear that 5-second clip? That's a conductor named William Eddins, Bill Eddins. There's no sexiest piece of classical music ever written, but he says it like he damn well knows it. And you know that he believes it in his guts.
I'm going to reveal to you the sexiest piece of classical music ever written.
He's not just making it up for effect. He believes it. By the way, he was talking about the string quartet by Maurice Ravel. For what it's worth. He has a point of view, comes across clearly and directly, and is memorable. Here's Midori.
The educational value of the youth orchestra programs, they are just so immense. It's not just about the music. It's about, changing a life.
Midori, who has altered her career to such an extent. I mean, she could just play 10 concerts a year, 20 concerts a year, have a fantastic income, but she has chosen to devote a tremendous amount of energy to education and to sharing music with a lot of kids who wouldn't have access to it otherwise. And I love the last thing she says.
The educational value of the youth orchestra programs, they are just so immense. It's not just about the music. It's about, changing a life.
It's about changing a life. Natalie Joichet, flutist from Brooklyn, also has some thoughts about teaching.
It's amazing to me to go into classrooms because I know that I never saw myself as a guest in a classroom, as a student. I go into each classroom setting, whether it's with young children or in a mentorship capacity with older university students, and I try to see each person that's in the room. I think it's really valuable as a young person to have an adult look at you and say, I see you, and what you are doing is wonderful. Who you are is wonderful. Having just one person say that to you in your life can make a really big difference.
Natalie's she's the daughter of Haitian immigrants, grew up in the Haitian community in Brooklyn, tremendous flutist, went to Juilliard, totally has the credentials of a classical training and plays and writes a much wider range of music as well. So that's one thing. Have a point of view. Tell stories about yourself. I played in a band that opened for the Grateful Dead. First time I went on the radio, I was too scared to talk. It's interesting to me, just reflecting on that, and the next thing I'm going to say, which is don't tell just the fun, positive stories about yourself. Share the failures. Maybe I should have that story about staring at the microphone and being too afraid to say anything. Maybe that should be in my bio too, because some of the most compelling stories are about failures.
I had a nightmare concert, a nightmare performance, like the worst concert I've ever had in my life, because I do have memory slips.
Simona Dinnerstein was playing the Maurice Ravel piano concerto, had it memorized, except she didn't, and had to stop. Like, it was so, like, she stopped, the orchestra stopped, like, as she said, like, it's a nightmare performance. And she shared that with me in an interview that she knew was being recorded for national broadcast. A professional pianist, her PR people would have said, don't tell that story. You don't want orchestras to hear that you had a memory slip and you had to stop. But then she went on to say what that meant to her and what she learned from that. She changed the way she learned pieces of music, not just front to back, but back to front. She learned the final phrase and then the beginning of the coda leading up to that, and then the transition leading up to the coda. And she learned it backwards too, and she's never had a memory slip since. But she started off by saying, oh my God, I had a concert where I had a memory slip and I stopped and it was a nightmare. That's so counterintuitive, and PR people would tell you, don't do that. Don't let that story out there. But to me, it makes her, I mean, I already admire her musicianship. The Goldberg Variations recording she did was wonderful. And now telling this story, she's human as well. Personal, oh my goodness. Violinist Augustine Hadley.
In December 1999, I was still living in Italy, where my parents have a farm, and I grew up there. And I had a very bad accident where I got burned very badly. I think it was 58% of my skin. One of the first things that came to my mind was that I might not be able to play again. But I mean, I met people at the hospital I was at that got burned 95%, so much worse off. So I decided I was in some ways very lucky in what happened, because I didn't injure my left hand, and I also didn't lose any fingers.
He went through 20 rounds of surgery. Thought he wouldn't be able to play again. Well, now, 20 years later, he's among my favorite violinists of his generation, and has a career as a chamber music player and orchestral soloist with major ensembles in all the big venues around the world. And that, I'm thinking of what you said, Paolo, about, yeah, but there's things I want to keep private in my life. And Augustine, when his career began 15-ish years ago, all his publicity pictures only showed one side of his face, because the other side of his face was pretty badly burned, and he had a lot of reconstructive surgery. So all his album covers, all his publicity shots, all the pictures in the paper were always just one side of his face. And about 10 years ago, he changed that. And now his pictures are straight on, both sides of his face equally lit. You see that the other side of his face is unusual. And he made a decision at some point to share that part of himself, that literal part of himself, with the world. He made the decision to tell me that story about being burned on the family farm. No, again, knowing it was for national broadcast. It's, again, humanizing, and may no one ever have to live through such a thing. But he did, and here he is, a wonderful musician, a fantastic violinist. And that's a story that he gets asked about a lot. And this is something else that, for some people, there are these kind of tentpole stories. Leon Fleischer lost the use of his right hand. He got focal dystonia, and his fingers kind of curled up like this. Oops, I'm still sharing. Let's stop sharing so you can see me. His fingers kind of curled up like this, and he lost the use of his right hand for 30 plus years. And then with Botox injections in his hand and certain kinds of massage, he got it back, and he was able to start playing with two hands again. Well, everybody wants to hear him tell that story, and he never does it grudgingly. He tells it every time as if it's the first time, and he's kind of reliving it, and he's real, and he's in the moment, and he's never just going through the motions. He never says, I'm tired of telling that story, because he knows it means something to people. I was very lucky to talk to Beverly Sills, and this goes back some years, but her nickname was Bubbles. She's been asked a million times, why does she have the nickname Bubbles?
Fred, that's a little bit hard to hear.
And I don't think I was very gurgly and bubbly. So it was simply that. It was a great big spit bubble, and it was popped. So the doctor said, I guess we're going to have to call this one Bubbles. And that's what happened.
Sorry if that was too low level to come across very well. When she was born, she had a spit bubble in her mouth, and the doctor popped it. And you can hear in the way she's telling that story, she's not just rehashing a story she's told a million times. She's in the moment as she's telling that story. Here's this one's longer. So let's make sure. Peter, tell me if this is not loud enough. This is violinist Robert Mcduffie.
I think if you share your screen again,
Oh,
that'll help
that was it.
Come through. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Peter. I'm sorry. See, Ching, I need you to teach me about multimedia. Okay, back to screen sharing. Push this button, push screen sharing, hit the screen button, push share. There we go. All right, let's hear the beginning of Beverly Hills.
Well, I was born with a big spit bubble in my mouth, and the doctor had to break it. So it's...
Yeah, so that's why she's called Bubbles. And then Robert Mcduffie.
I was 14 in Macon. I'd already been playing violin for 8 years, wanted to quit. I was also on the varsity basketball team. And our big playoff game was the night that Itzhak Perlman came to Macon. My parents made me go hear the performance.
They didn't let you play in the playoff game.
And I was starting. I had worked hard in basketball practice. I had been promoted to the starting team. The cheerleaders were going to see me introduced. It was very important for an adolescent. I went kicking and screaming to Mr. Perlman's performance. I sat on the front row. I made my parents sit in the back, literally crying. I didn't want to be there. But the minute he started to play, I experienced a joy of music making that I'd never experienced before. And having been a violinist myself for 8 years, I saw what he could do on that fiddle. It changed my life. It was that night that I decided to become a violinist and didn't really care about basketball anymore. Now, I'm in a poker group with Itzhak Perlman now. We've been in the same group for 20 years. And I remember when I told him that story, he said, well, you would have made a lot more money playing basketball. But, that's just his way of handling compliments. He likes to answer with jokes, but I think he was really touched at the same time.
A couple of these are like origin stories. Augustin Hadelich talking about being a teenager and something terrible that happened to him. Robert Mcduffie, how he went from being a promising violin student to devoting his life to music. Every single one of us in this room has not just an origin story, but things that we've had to overcome to get to where we are now. Kate, I'm so glad you asked me, and part of my origin story is staring at a microphone and being too afraid to say anything. We all have, every single one of us has these stories of attempting, being ambitious, failing, and what we did or did not learn from that. Jerry just wrote a comment, vulnerability helps connect. Exactly. When I've done this same kind of talk in person for students, most recently at the Curtis Institute, I've sometimes asked folks to just talk to me. Just let's you and me just have a conversation about who you are and what you do and why you do what you do. And it's unerring and it's universally true that every one of us who enters this field has fear, has ambition, and has stories of things that we've had to overcome. And every time I've done this, I've sat down with a young musician or a composer, and several of them start off by saying, there's nothing interesting about me. I got nothing. No, I'm just a regular person. But then we talk for 5 minutes, and there's something amazing and memorable in everybody's story. I was just mentioning to you and some friends recently that I went to see the late, great Spalding Gray, monologist Spalding Gray, do a show in Brooklyn. And it was shortly after his movie Swimming to Cambodia came out. And man, I just loved what he did with his planned written monologue. And I went hoping to see that again. And he got up on stage and he just sat there in a chair and had a little microphone. And he said, I got nothing planned. I don't know what to do. They're paying me for 2 hours and I don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 hours. And I thought, oh, come on, man. I made the trip all the way to Brooklyn to see you. What are you doing? And he said, I'm just going to invite some people up from the audience and we're just going to talk. And it was 3 people, easily filled 2 hours with some of the most fascinating conversation about their lives. It's not just, I mean, all of us are in kind of a special position, artists, aspiring artists, dealing with the history of the art form and what we want the future of the art form to be and where we fit in all of that. And that comes with special vulnerabilities and pain and discovery at every step of the way. But everybody in every walk of life has these same basic dynamics and principles too. So I've got some more audio clips I could play for you, but I'm also noticing that it's 9 minutes till the top of the hour, and I'd love to just throw it open and chat. Let me just at least scroll through a little bit, see if there are any comments. A compact bio using hypertext that allows readers to do a deep dive if they wish. Excellent. JX, excellent comment. Yes. If you have the wherewithal to put hyperlinks in your bio, all the better. The one I didn't really look at, we just saw the front page of Gustavo Dudamel's bio. His is just layer upon layer upon layer. It's like an infinitely unfolding book of hyperlinks.
I think you got the things that appeared in the chat. I was kind of keeping track. If we're missing somebody, let me know.
Yeah, or if anybody wants to just unmute yourself and make a comment or observation or question or share something from your own experience, or hey, more critique of my bio.
Kate?
Hi.
just speaking of more critique of Fred's bio. Maybe she's done.
No, this is just a general question. Thank you, first of all, for this really illuminating talk. Learned a lot, really appreciate your time. More and more often, and we sort of got to this a little earlier, I'm asked for an 100-word bio, and I find that particularly challenging to manage. So I'm wondering if you have any tips about what to include in such a small number of words.
I love that. That's a great question. What do you do with if somebody says, I need a 100-word bio, 100 words or less? What do I put in there? It's like being a composer and thriving in the world of limitations.
Or just
I got to turn you up to hear you, Kate.
I was just going to say, it's like being asked to write your bio in a tweet or something.
Yeah, like being asked to write a bio in a tweet. Yeah. Pick that one favorite story. Pick 3 top credentials and 1 favorite story. And that's it. Tell the story in 2 sentences. Have 3 little credentials that you weave in, and that's it. And if you've already been asked to send a bio, it's probably something where they've already hired you. So this is for like a program note in a concert. So you're already in the door. You don't need to, you're not trying to get your foot in and pry that door open a little bit. You're already in the door. Yeah. Pick out that one story, boil it down. I played in a band that opened for the Grateful Dead at the Oakland Coliseum. And I once got to interview Emmylou Harris. Kate, I know your name. You're a violinist, right? Yeah. I don't think you and I have ever met, but yeah. So what's your, well, where did you grow up?
I grew up in northern New Jersey in the suburbs of New York City.
In northern New Jersey, suburbs of New York. How did you start playing the violin?
So when I was really little, a baby, my mom took me to Music Together, which was like a mommy and me sort of music class, early childhood music class. And when I once I got too old for that, my parents asked the teacher how I could continue since I really loved music. And the teacher suggested Suzuki violin. So when I was 3, I started, but I don't remember that. I was so young, but that's how I started.
Ah, the family lore before you even have the memories of it. Yes. Those become family legends.
Yes.
See, and we're already heading down a path that, okay, so you already loved music, like before you can even remember anything in your life, you already loved music. So I can see we're already heading down a path that has interesting stories about how that love of music developed when violin became not just a pastime, but like a lifetime passion for you, the different ways that's led you. And I know you play with ensembles that do a lot of new music, how you came to that. See, I can see the story beginning to unfold already.
I know in my own bio my own bio needs a lot of work because it definitely is just a list mostly, but I took a couple of detours in my musical life in college and things like that I think I could talk about that more and paint a broader picture.
Kate Dreyfus loved music since before she can remember. Opening sentence of a bio. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah. Wow, it's super close to the top of the hour now.
I'm not going to cut you off, Fred. This is a friendly format here.
It's not like, when I do my daily radio show, it has to be exactly 2 hours, and each hour has to be exactly 59 minutes.
Exactly. Yeah. Our sponsors are chomping at the bit here. So can you wrap it up, please?
Right. If anybody else has specific questions about bios or general questions, I mean, we haven't even talked about the world of new media and social media, which is changing so fast and so rapidly. And Paolo raised this interesting question, and I have a real resistance to sharing everything and every day and pictures and videos on social media. And even, I mean, G and I will take pictures of something like our dinner, and she'll be like, "Oh, what? You didn't put up the picture of our dinner?" I'll be, "Oh, I just enjoyed eating it." She's like, "No, but you should share that." I mean, these are legitimate conversations, and people have legitimate differences and different personalities and different approaches to this. So Paolo, I think Paolo might have signed off, but I totally get that. And man, do I empathize with that. And you got to balance that with knowing that you can have some control over telling the story about yourself that's out in the world. I see. I've seen a couple of people who are outdoors, and I'm so jealous. Jerry was walking outdoors at one point. I don't know who else has a thought or a comment or an observation or a question. Interviews are easier when. Oh, wait a minute. Where'd that go? Oh, from Wang Ji. All interviews are easier when the interviewer is not your future spouse. She and I met when I interviewed her 10 years ago, fall of 2010, on stage with the Minnesota Orchestra. They were playing one of her symphonies, and we were doing a live broadcast, and there were 7 living composers. I interviewed each one on stage before the concert, right like moments before Osmo Venska and the Minnesota Orchestra play their piece for a packed house at Orchestra Hall in Minneapolis and a live broadcast audience. And I had told all of the composers the questions I was going to ask them ahead of time, because I wanted to kind of make it easier and lower the stress. Well, this one composer struck me as having a little extra spark. So when her turn came, I did not ask her the questions I had told her I was going to ask her. And my memory of it is that it was fantastic. And she thought on her feet after like a second and a half of being like deer in the headlights. G, what was your experience of that?
Worst interview of my life.
because I didn't know at the time, but she had gone back to her hotel room and prepared an answer to the questions I had told her I was going to ask her. I mean, she did her homework. And then I asked her completely different questions. And here we are now married.
You know, I was really like scared of that suit you were wearing, that stripes.
Oh yeah, I had pants with pleats, and I had the vertical stripes, and long since lost that suit, but yeah.
You did ask her one question where she had quite a well-prepared, succinct answer. I think it was, will you marry me? Maybe.
That came some years later. It took a while to get to that. And it's a yes or no question, but she did not answer with yes nor with no.
Well, that's a start, right? At least it's not a no.
See, this is in my daily broadcast, we call this a tease line. Oh, what did she say? What did she say? She said, "What took you so long?" Of course I'll marry you. Maybe that should be in my bio too.
You know, that's what my father-in-law said when I asked for my wife's hand. It has multiple meanings, I think. What took you so long?
Yeah. What took you? Yes, right. What took you so long? There's a lot there in just those few words. I think, Peter, the plan was to pivot into just a kind of a hang anyway. Am I remembering that right? Yeah.
So what I wanted to do was just keep it very informal, and I'm going to stop recording, and we're going to just make this on the honor system. So if you would like to stick around, especially the people who are at the beginning of their careers, we would love to have that. If you want to stick around and listen in anyway, you're welcome. But I wanted this to be just a closed session that people can say what's really on their mind and ask the questions that they really want to know, and that'll be safe for everyone. So I'm going to stop recording, and if you're taking off, I want to thank you for joining us, and it's been really, really wonderful to have you here for these two incredible talks. And I hope that you can join us for all of the events that we have coming up. And thanks to Wanji and Fred so much.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks. I see a lot of thanks from Carlos and Meryl and Giancarlo and Amy and Ben. Thank you for being here and being part of this and making it a collaboration, not just a monologue, but a dialogue. I so appreciate that. And man, I've got some improvements I can make to my bio now.
I told Kate that can be the first line of her bio now is known for her revisions of Fred Child's bio. Absolutely. Kate is also a violinist.
I love it.
Thanks to everybody.